The wind screamed low across the prairie, dragging dust in great size across the dead grass. It was the kind of heat that made the earth crack like old leather, the kind that boiled the scent of death up from the ground. High above, a lone hawk circled in a wide, silent spiral. Below it, a wagon sat sun-bleached and still, its canvas warped and stained, wooden wheels sunken slightly into the dried mud. There were no hoofprints nearby, no man, no woman, only the oppressive hush of open land. From a distance, it looked like an abandoned settler cart, just another remnant of a journey cut short. But up close, the truth became unbearable. Inside the wagon, there were children, 9 of them. Their skins shone with sweat, and their lips were cracked so badly they bled when they spoke. The oldest, a freckled girl of about 12, sat with a younger boy across her lap. His breathing was shallow, his small chest rising like a dry bellows. She said she'd be back by morning. The girl whispered, her voice dry as gravel, "But it's almost night again." No one answered. One of the toddlers began to cry, not loud, not wild, just the whimpering sound of a child too tired to scream. Another girl, maybe 5, reached over and stroked the crying one's hand without speaking. Outside the wagon, the world continued to burn under the high sun. Flies buzzed near the wheels. A rag of fabric fluttered in the wind, catching on a jagged nail like a flag of surrender, and then finally, HOOFBEATS. Her name was Ada Monroe, and she rode like she had nowhere left to go. The mule beneath her feet was ragged and slow, its ears twitching irritably at every gust. She didn't mind. She wasn't in a hurry anymore. Ada had the sun behind her and the wind ahead. Her clothes were plain dusty, calico skirt, faded blouse, worn boots. Her wide-brimmed hat cast shadow over a face carved by loss and sharpened by survival. The rifle on her back was her late husband's. The bedroll was hers. The sorrow was shared between them. A letter sat folded inside her saddlebag. She'd written it herself, no recipient, no address. Just one line, over and over, "Survive. That's enough." Her husband Owen had died last fall cholera in Dodge City. He went blue in a matter of hours. Her unborn child followed a few weeks later, a stillbirth that left her screaming into a cold winter morning. Since then, Ada had drifted. No family, no land, just this mule and a direction. She followed what looked like a wagon trail, though it was odd, too deep, and wandered. Off the main path, as she descended a ridge, she saw something strange. A broken wheel, rut in the dirt, and a smear of blood on a stone. She slowed the mule. There was no sign of struggle, no other riders, just that lonely drag of wheels and something in the air. Wrongness. Sun was starting its fall when she finally crested the hill and saw it. The wagon, still ghostly. Wrong. She pulled her mule to a stop and dismounted. Her boots hit the earth with a hollow thud. She approached the wagon slowly, eyes narrowed beneath the brim of her hat. "Hello," she called, cautious. "Anyone here?" Silence. She stepped closer. The wagon's canvas was yellowed, stained dark in spots. She reached for the flap, hesitating. Then a thud. Her hand shot back as something hit the inside of the canvas. Another thud. Then a tiny handprint pressed against the fat. Basma, trembling. Ada's stomach turned cold. Without a second thought, she drew her knife and cut through the canvas in one sharp motion. The smell hit her first. Stale air, sweat, urine, faint, rot. Inside, 9 pairs of eyes stared back at her. Children, cramped together in the sweltering dark. One was lying in the back, barely conscious. Another had soaked her dress in sweat, cheeks red with heat stroke. A Gerslam dirty, with wild, dark hair spoke first. "She locked us in. She said, as if explaining something she didn't fully understand. Said she'd be back before supper yesterday." Ada climbed up, hand covering her nose. The children flinched. She kept her voice calm. "Who locked you in?" The girl pointed toward the horizon. "Miss Bertha said we were going to California. We was gonna be actresses." She paused, but she didn't come back. "We ran out of water. Emmett wet himself. We didn't tell." Ada glanced down. The smallest boy clutched a broken tin cup. It was dry. "How long?" The girl shrugged. "I think 2 sons. Maybe 3. Ada stepped down, jaw clenched. Her instinct was to ride for town, find the marshal, bring help, but town was over 20 miles back. They'd never last that long. Not in this heat, not like this. She turned and looked at them again. 9 children, strangers, dirt-smeared, hollow-eyed, trembling. And for the first time in months, she heard Owen's voice in her head again. "You don't get to quit breathing just 'cause life quits holding your hand." Ada knelt down, pulled her water skin off the mule, and poured the last half cup into the lid of her kettle. She passed it and carefully rationed, turns first the youngest, then the weakest. "No gulping," she murmured. "Sip, let it touch your lips, not your throat." She kept her tone even, like she was teaching school again. When it was done, she took the children out, one by one, setting them beneath the thin shade of the wagon. She spread her blanket over a wagon axle and hung her coat up as an extra shield. The girl sobbed softly into her skirt. She didn't flinch. As the sun fell into orange and the sky softened into purple haze, Ada lit a small fire, added a pinch of dry tea to a dented tin pot, and set the last of her water to boil. She fished out 2 hard biscuits from her pack and began breaking them into crumbs. There wasn't enough for 10, but she fed them anyway. And then, as the wind carried the smell of distant thunder, Ada sat on a rock beside the wagon, boots planted in the dust, and whispered aloud almost to herself, "Lord, what have you laid in front of me now?" The prairie stretched on like a cruel joke, flat, blistered, and silent. The heat came not just from the sun above, but from the baked earth itself, rising in waves and biting the soles of their boots. Ada Monroe walked first, pulling the stubborn mule behind her, its reins looped over her wrist. Behind her came the children in a fragile line barely taller than the wagon wheels they'd left behind. Some held hands. Others stared at the ground like they were searching for something to believe in. The wagon was useless now. The wheel had split, the canvas torn. She'd salvaged what she could: blankets, a tarp, some rusted tin bowls. But they had no water, save what little she had boiled the night before, and 40 miles of sun-baked prairie between them and the next outpost. 40 miles, not a road, not a river, just dust and bones. They walked slow. The children stumbled more than once. Emmett, the thin one with dark curls and silent eyes, collapsed first. His legs gave out near a clump of dried brush. He didn't cry, just crumpled like a doll left out in the rain. Ada knelt beside him, checked his forehead, hot as iron. He murmured something, "Mama," and Ada's hand shook for a second. Not because of the word, because of the way he said it, like it belonged to someone who was gone. She poured a trickle of water into a rag and placed it on his lips. He sucked it weakly. She hoisted him onto the mule, tightening the rope she used as a makeshift saddle strap. By late afternoon, the buzzards came. They circled above, slow and patient, watching. Ada didn't say anything, but the children noticed. One pointed wide over us. Ada lead. "They're just moving west like we are." But she could see it, the way they circled Emmett's limp form on the mule, the way they dipped lower every time the line slowed. Then came the water pouch. She heard the soft rip before she saw it. A leather water skin had torn clean open against a sharp buckle, spilling the last few gulps onto the dirt. A little boy screamed and dropped to his knees, trying to lick the mud where it fell. Ada pulled him back gently, holding him against her as he sobbed into her shoulder. Her lips cracked as she whispered, "We're not done yet, baby, not done." But in her mind, she was already hearing a voice that wasn't there. "You're gonna let him die out here, just like ours did, Ada." It was Owen's voice. Her husband, dead and buried 6 counties back. She shut her eyes tight, shook her head like a drunk fighting the bottle. Survived. That's enough. That night, Ada made a rough camp in the crook of a dried-out ravine. She strung the tarp between 2 wagon axles she'd dragged and buried upright like posts. It made a low shelter, just tall enough for the children to crawl beneath. She showed them how to tie scraps of cloth to sticks and stick them into the earth, tilted toward the open sky. "Duel come in the morning. Soak these and wring 'em out," she said, her voice hoarse. The children didn't question it. They did as they were told. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes howled. She cleaned her rifle. 1 shot left. She waited until the howls grew louder, closer, and then she stood up, calm as Sunday. Bang. The sound cracked across the prairie like a broken spine. The coyotes ran. She sat back down, alone in the dark, and cradled her rifle like a child. Near dawn, Ada found a dead rabbit, shriveled and stiff near a rock bed. Likely heat stroke, or poison weed. The children gathered around it, staring down at the limp creature. No one said anything. Then Letty, the oldest, knelt beside it. "Shouldn't just leave it, ain't right." So they buried it in the sand. Ada led a short prayer, and the children stood in silence, like they were saying goodbye to something bigger than a rabbit. Maybe innocence, maybe hope. He watched from the ridge. A lean figure, barely visible in the pale morning haze, crouched in the shadow of an outcrop. His skin was the color of coppered oak. Long, black braids fell down either side of his chest. He had no horse, no sound, only a bow on his back, and eyes that never blinked. Tomas Red El Carrera was used to watching. He had watched his father die on the same plains. Ada now wandered, watched the common Korea vanish into barbed wire and deeds with forged signatures. He trusted few things now, but when he saw a lone woman guiding 9 children across the open prairie, something stirred. That night, after the coyotes ran and Ada slept curled against the mule, he crept into camp like a shadow. He left a water's full, still cool, and vanished without a sound. Ada found it at dawn. Beside her boots, she crouched low, eyes sweeping the camp. No footprints, just the skin. She touched the leather like it might vanish. The water inside was real. She sniffed it, tasted it, drop clean. Whoever it was had been watching and helping. She didn't wake the children. She just whispered, "Thank you, stranger," into the wind, and tucked the skin away. They moved again by mid-morning, but the heat was worse now, heavy, like wool soaked in fire. Emmett hadn't spoken since yesterday. His lips were turning blue. Ada tried singing as they walked. A hymn she barely remembered. Swing low, sweet chariot, but her voice cracked halfway through. One of the children, a girl named Sadie, took her hand. Neither of them said a word. And then Emmett was gone. She turned around and he was just not there. The mule plodded forward, lightened of weight. The rope had come undone. The boy had slipped off somewhere in the last half mile. Panic rose like fire in her throat. Stay here, she barked, planting the oldest boy with the rifle. Don't move, don't speak to no one. She took off into the scrub, heart hammering. She followed the only footprints she could find. Bare, child-sized, erratic. Then she heard a hiss, a flash of movement, a rattlesnake, coiled under a rock, ready to strike. Thunk. An arrow buried itself in the serpent's head. Ada stumbled back, rifle raised, and there he stood. Red Elk. Not 5 paces away. In his arms. Emmett. Alive. They stared at each other. Ada's breath came shallow. He handed the boy to her gently. Ada, why'd you help? Red Elk calmly. Because someone helped me once. He looked over her shoulder at the horizon. You won't make it west with these many, not like this. Ada looked down at Emmett, cradled in her arms, and then back to the man who had saved them without asking for thanks, or trust, or explanation. The wind blew hard across the prairie, and for a long time, nobody spoke. Night draped itself over the prairie like a worn blanket, soft, frayed at the edges, full of secrets. The children slept in a loose circle beneath a mesquite tree, curled close to one another, using coats and canvas as makeshift beds. The wind had cooled, but Ada couldn't rest. She sat by the fire, her knees pulled close to her chest, hands still trembling from the day's walk. Red Elk kept to the edge of the glow, sharpening a small knife without looking at her. The sparks from the fire caught his face in flickers, revealing a quiet kind of patience. A small rustle behind them. Letty, the oldest girl, stepped into the firelight, clutching a blanket around her. Ada offered a soft smile. Can't sleep. The girl shook her head. Can I sit? Ada nodded. Letty lowered herself onto a log and stared into the flames. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then, that woman who locked us in. She wasn't our aunt. Ada turned. Slowly, she told us to call her Miss Bertha, but she didn't know half our names. Letty said. Her voice was low and flat, like someone speaking of a nightmare long after they'd stopped dreaming it. She bought us or took us, I don't know, after the fires. Ada frowned. Fires. Letty looked up. When the soldiers came through, they said they were clearing out towns full of sympathizers, folks who'd helped Indians during the wars. My ma gave water to a scout once. That was enough. She swallowed. They shot my daddy. My ma, she burned. Ada blinked back, the tears before they could rise. And the others, same. Different towns. Miss Bertha picked us up in ones and twos, told us we were going to California, said people would pay good money for healthy kids out there. She called it rebuilding after the war. Ada felt the air go thin. They hadn't been forgotten. They'd been discarded. And no one was coming for them. Letty looked down at her hands. I thought maybe she was lying. But then she locked us in and rode off. Didn't even leave a canteen. Silence. Ada's hand drifted to her stomach, the spot where her child had once been. A memory bloomed. The cold hands of the midwife, the way the room had gone still, the voice saying, he didn't cry, I'm sorry, and after, the midwife had said something odd, something Ada hadn't understood at the time. Maybe God's making room in your arms for something else. She hadn't believed it, but now, Ada reached out and placed her hand gently over Letty's. You're not going to California, she said softly. Not like that, not ever. By midday, the sun was a hard coin burning straight overhead, and the canyon ahead lay like a cracked scar in the land. Steep, narrow, winding. Ada and Red Elk stopped the group near a dry riverbed. He scanned the rocks. We move fast. Shadows'll cover the walls soon, but this is a choke point. Ada nodded. She felt a tooth of stillness, the smell, the way the mule snorted uneasily. Then she saw them. 3 riders, ragged men on thin horses. Their clothes filthy, their hats slouched low, rifles across their backs. One had a scar splitting his upper lip. Another carried a whip. They approached slowly, like wolves testing a fence. Ada stepped forward, putting herself between the children and the riders. The one in front, tall, with tobacco stains on his teeth, smiled wide. Well now, he drawled, ain't this a pretty sight? Ada gripped her rifle tighter. We're just passing through. The man looked over the group slowly, his eyes landing on each child like they were goods on a shelf. You know, he said, I don't see no lawman with you. Don't see no freight stamp, neither. Looks like stolen property to me. Red Elk stepped beside Ada, silent. Another man laughed. We're just looking out for the economy, ma'am. Folks out west pay handsomely for good help, especially quiet ones. Ada raised her rifle. Her hands shook. You get back on those horses, she said. You ain't talking nobody. Scarlip spat into the dust. Or what? You'll fire. One shot, then what? That mule's worth less than them kids. The third rider reached for something. Ada didn't wait, she fired. The blast echoed through the canyon. One rider screamed as he fell off his horse, clutching his shoulder. The mule bolted in panic, dragging half the supplies with it. Chaos erupted. Red Elk moved like a shadow. He grabbed two of the smaller children and waved the others forward. The cave, he shouted. Ada turned to run, but Scarlett lunged. Her rifle clattered to the rocks. He slammed into her, dragging her by the collar toward the cliff wall. She kicked and clawed. Rocks tore at her palms. Then Red Elk hit him like a hammer. The two men crashed into the canyon wall. Blood sprayed, dust flew. They grappled, punched, rolled over sharp stone. Ada crawled toward her rifle. Another bandit was aiming at Red Elk's back. Ada screamed, grabbed the rifle, and without thinking pulled the trigger. The bandit fell, face first. Red Elk broke Scarlett's nose with the butt of his bow and let him crumple in the dust. The last man, a boy no older than 20, turned and galloped off into the canyon, his hat flying behind him. Silence returned slowly. Dust settled. Flies buzzed. Ada stood, breath ragged. Her dress was torn. Her arms were scraped raw. Her hands were stained red. Red Elk stood opposite her, chest heaving. Blood dripped from a gash above his brow. They stared at each other. I ain't ever shot a man before, Ada whispered. Red Elk didn't flinch. You just did what the earth asked, he said. That night, they camped in a narrow ridge above the canyon. The fire was small. The mule had returned by dusk, spooked but alive. The children were shaken but unhurt. Red Elk sat sharpening his blade again, legs crossed beneath him. Ada joined him, knees sore, hands still bandaged. She didn't speak at first. Then, quietly, I don't know how to be what they need. Red Elk didn't look up. You don't need to know, he said. You just need to stay. She exhaled slowly. He reached into a leather pouch and pulled out a tiny carving, a wolf pup, whittled smooth from bone. He placed it in her palm. To guard your steps. Ada closed her fingers around it. For the first time in months, she didn't feel empty, just tired, and not alone. The moon was still clinging to the sky when Red Elk led them down through the canyon basin. The land had changed greener now, softer. Brush grew thick around the edges of a thin river that shimmered silver beneath the coming light. Reached it. The divide. On the other side lay sanctuary, a mission built into the hills, where the wounded and unwanted found a kind of peace. But between them and salvation was water. The current wasn't deep, but it ran swift. Spring snowmelt from far-off mountains gave it teeth. Ada squinted at the crossing and tasted her fear. Red Elk said quietly, if we go slow, we die. The sun will rise soon. And the river gets stronger. Ada nodded. No time for fear. Only choices. She tore strips from her petticoat, used rope and belts to tie the children in pairs, lashing them around their waists. Then, she wrapped herself in the mule's bridle rope and tied the other end to the smallest child. I go first, she said. Hold tight, don't fight the water. They stepped in. It hit her knees first, cold and fast. Each step was a battle. The river tugged like it knew their weakness. One girl slipped. The line jolted. Ada spun and saw Sadie's small hands vanish beneath the surface. No thought. She dived. Boots dragging silt. Bonnet flying off. Her body slamming into the rocks below. She reached, pulled, gasped. Sadie coughed water, sputtered, clung to her. The others were screaming. Red Elk appeared on the far shore, wading in fast, grabbing two children by their belts. They made it. Wet, shivering, mud covered, but alive. They collapsed onto the far bank. The mule stood dripping beside them, snorting. A beat of silence, just breathing. Then one boy whispered, "Did we die?" Ada, still dripping, laughed through the tears. Not today. The mission outpost stood beneath a ridge of stone and cottonwood. Trees, a weather-worn compound of adobe walls, tin roofs, and a bell tower too cracked to ring. But it was alive, smoke from chimneys, laundry drying on lines, goats bleating near the fence. People stopped and stared as Ada and the children trudged into the yard, muddy, bruised, tired. An older black woman with a cane stepped forward, eyes wide. Where in God's name? Where did you find all these children? Ada wiped a smudge of blood from her brow. I didn't. She looked back at the kids behind her, now clustering around Red Elk. They found me. The next hours were a blur. Warm water, blankets, rice and beans. The children washed, fed, cradled by soft hands, and whispered prayers. One girl wouldn't let go of Ada's skirt. Another let us sat still as a sister gently braided her tangled hair. Ada sat on the porch, bare feet on stone. Red Elk stood near the corral, watching the horizon. She walked to him. You staying? He shook his head slowly. Not my place. You gave them back their road. That's enough. He reached into his pouch and took her hand. The carved wolf. This was for the road. Now it's for the door. She closed her fingers. Around it. The children gathered at the gate as he walked away. They waved. Some cried. Ada didn't. She just whispered, "Thank you." He didn't turn back. That night, by candlelight, Ada sat in a small room with a wooden desk and a stitched wool blanket. She wrote on the back of her old letter. The one she once thought no one would read. I walked into the desert alone. I didn't leave that way. She folded it, tucked it inside her old saddlebag. And for the first time in months, slept without her rifle. Spring had returned. The prairie was green in places now, speckled with wildflowers, soft underfoot. In the garden beside the mission wall, Ada knelt planting seeds, the same ones she had carried across the plains in her saddlebag. Her hands, once cracked and blistered, moved with practiced grace. Children's voices rang behind her. They were running, barefoot and wild, chasing goats, laughing under the morning sun. Inside the mission, Ada taught them letters, stitched their torn clothes, wiped their tears. She wasn't their mother, but they didn't ask her to be. She was simply the one who stayed. A rider approached one morning, a young woman no more than 20, belly round with child, face marked by bruises and dust. She dismounted slowly, eyes full of fear. Ada met her at the gate. "You can rest here," she said, offering her hand. "You're safe now." The girl collapsed into her arms. That night, in her room, Ada lit a small candle and opened a cedar box. Inside, a child's cloth scrap with a name stitched in blue thread, Azak. Beside it, she placed the carved wolf dot. She sat quietly, her fingers rested over both, and she whispered, "You gave me this life, and I finally lived it." In a land where silence often meant death, one widow became the voice of survival. From sun-scorched plains to canyon shadows, Ada Monroe carried 9 forgotten children to the edge of hope and stepped beyond it. If this story moved you, share it. Someone out there might need to hear that even in the harshest sun, there's still shelter to be found. Like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Ashes of the West for more true-hearted frontier stories that echo long after the last shot is fired.